I call the honourable member Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased to rise on behalf of New Zealand First to take a call in this Appropriation Supplementary Estimates Bill. I want to talk, Mr Speaker, actually I don't want to talk about, but I'm compelled to talk about. I'm compelled to revisit, once again, this government's incomprehensible irresponsibility when it comes to biosecurity. 3/4 of New Zealand's economy is based in agriculture, Mr Speaker. Directly or indirectly, somewhere north of 75% of this country's income, our export earnings, are generated by the things which we grow in the ground or fish from the sea: the forestry, the vineyards, the orchards and the market gardens and the arable crops. From the green dairy pastures of the Waikato and the Naki to the even greener farms of Southland, from the great granary which is Canterbury to the vineyards of Marlborough, the bulk of New Zealand's wealth comes from down on the farm. And then there are the animals which provide the great part of that wealth, Mr Speaker. And so I want to talk about foot and mouth disease. And I think it is important that we address the subject of foot and mouth disease because this government's approach to biosecurity, its irresponsible "look mum, no hands" approach to biosecurity, means that the prospect of this country succumbing to foot and mouth disease, from which we have until now remained free, is a matter not of if but of when. Sometime in the dim distant past, Mr Speaker, the continent of Zealandia broke off from Gondwanaland, drifted away and sank. And then about 23 million years ago, or thereabouts, according to those learned types who profess to know about such things, it began to rise again. The New Zealand of today, these islands which we call home, they are the bits of that continent which now protrude above the waves. Those waves have served us well as a biosecurity moat, Mr Speaker. Until the advent of man, the only creatures which were able to inhabit these islands were those which could fly or swim or had the good fortune to be blown here on the wind. Birds and bats and insects, but no mammals, other than marine mammals, and perhaps the elusive and possibly mythical Waitariki, the native otter. In the absence of predators, the birds lost the ability to fly. As we know, this was a genuine paradise, free of pests and diseases, and in fact anything nasty. The wheels began to fall off that, of course, with the arrival of the first waka and the rats which came ashore as part of the uninvited cargo that our First Nations people brought with them. And then shortly thereafter, in geological terms, more waka began to arrive. Different waka. The big ones with the tall masts and the square white things on top, and the pale-faced occupants. And they brought other critters with them. The four-legged, cloven-hoofed ones, which today are the basis of our agricultural sector and our economy. And they too, in the early days, lived and evolved in splendid isolation, free from many of the diseases which subsequently ravaged the stock from which they had come, back in the old countries of Britain and Europe. The pigs and the goats, which were released on our outlying islands by Captain Cook almost 250 years ago, are even today a source of clean genetic material for our breeding and medicinal industries, despite the best efforts of the Department of Conservation to have them wiped out for the crime of being non-Indigenous. Well, maybe they weren't always Indigenous, Mr Speaker, but I would contend that they are now. Just like the pine trees and the grapevines and the wheat and the kiwi fruit and the spuds and all the other things which form the basis for our way of life and our way of earning a living. And I might add, just like people. Humans are no more Indigenous to these islands than any other Johnny-come-lately organism which has flown or drifted or blown in on the wind these past 23 million years. We're all interlopers, Mr Speaker, and until recently we've been protected by the moat which is the ocean that surrounds us. No longer, however. In this day and age, there are other ways for people and things to reach these shores. There are great steel waka and mighty aluminium birds, and they carry people and goods and creatures and organisms from the far reaches of the earth. And one of the things which they haven't carried yet, but which one day one of them will, is foot and mouth disease. And when that horrible virus arrives, and it is a case of when and not if, the results will be terrible for this country, for the entire agricultural sector and for the entire economy. MPI's own website carries the following blunt warning, Mr Speaker, and I quote: "If FMD reached New Zealand, virtually all exports of meat, animal byproducts and dairy products would stop. They would not resume until at least 3 months after the slaughter of the last infected animal. The country's trade reputation would be damaged, unemployment would rise, up by about 20,000 jobs, and the gross domestic product would lose $10 billion over a 2-year period." Foot and mouth disease is a highly contagious viral disease which affects cloven-hoofed animals such as sheep, cattle, pigs, goats, llamas and deer, the website says. It can be spread by saliva, mucus, milk, faeces, and can be carried on wool, hair, grass, footwear, clothing, livestock equipment and vehicle tyres. It can also spread quickly over long distances by wind. The virus likes damp, cool conditions and is easily spread when animals are penned up. It does not like warmth and humidity, but in the right conditions has been shown capable of surviving several weeks in the soil or on grass, sheep wool or cattle hair. Clinical signs of the disease vary between species, but blisters on the nose, mouth and feet are consistent. Animals stop eating, become depressed and lame, and salivate a lot. There is no cure." End quote. The only protection we have as a nation against the arrival of foot and mouth is the ability to be vigilant at the border, to be prepared for the arrival of the virus, to detect it before it makes landfall and to stop it before it gets in. And in the face of this reality, this government is cutting the biosecurity budget. The report of the Primary Production Committee on the 2012-13 estimates for vote primary production states, "The Minister stated that biosecurity is one of his top priorities. We note that close to 60 biosecurity jobs in the Ministry were disestablished and the number of dogs working at the border has been reduced. At the time of the hearing, there were no dogs at Wellington Airport." The Minister was asked the reason for the decision to cut the biosecurity budget and frontline services while many risk items continue to cross New Zealand's border. The Ministry has indicated an intention to hire 40 new staff, and the Minister explained that the budget was restructured to reflect demand more accurately. The dog shortage resulted from dog handlers resigning, and the Ministry is looking for replacements. The Minister acknowledged that New Zealand is always at risk of incursion, and he believes that the Ministry's biosecurity system is very effective. We asked whether disestablishing biosecurity in New Zealand would adversely affect the Ministry's ability to respond effectively to biosecurity incursions. The Ministry believes, on the contrary, that the disestablishment of biosecurity in New Zealand has been beneficial. It has allowed the Ministry to group teams by expertise within the Ministry structure. And yet the Government has cut $6 million from vote biosecurity. The report continues, "Furthermore, we heard that the size of the Ministry allows it to respond to situations comprehensively. Some of us are concerned, nevertheless, that reduced border security will increase New Zealand's risk of biosecurity incursion." Indeed, they are concerned, Mr Speaker. There are some exceptionally fine people on that committee, by whose leave I sit on a regular basis as an observer. Fine members from all parties are well aware of the danger inherent in dropping the nation's guard in this incomprehensibly irresponsible manner. And yet, I quote again, the Ministry believes, on the contrary, that the disestablishment of biosecurity in New Zealand has been beneficial. It has allowed the Ministry to group teams by expertise within the Ministry structure. Incredible. All we have to do is make the smoke thicker and the mirrors shinier, and the foot and mouth virus won't notice the fact that we've cut $6 million from the budget, or that there are no sniffer dogs, or that anyone with the right passport can waltz across the border with their person and their luggage completely uninspected, and it won't be able to get in. That is truly incredible, Mr Speaker, or perhaps it is completely insane. Just last week, we heard about a shipment of palm kernel from somewhere in Asia, which was found to have a goat's leg in it. A goat's leg. How disgusting. That's like finding a finger in your mince pie, only a whole lot worse and a whole lot more serious. At any rate, we think it was a goat's leg. We're not sure it was from a goat, and we're not sure which country it came from. And we wouldn't have known it was here at all if the farmer hadn't reported it. All we know for sure is that it was from a cloven-hoofed animal, and it came from a country in Asia where foot and mouth is endemic. We import rubbish like palm kernel from countries which don't care about health or hygiene or quality control, and at the same time, we cut the biosecurity budget and leave the door wide open. And we will get foot and mouth because of it. Not if, when. $6 million, Mr Speaker. That is all we are saving in the name of demonstrating that foolish ideas like the smart gate are the wrong way to go. And in the process, we are throwing away our entire livestock and dairy industries and costing the country $10 billion and 20,000 jobs. It is a disgrace, Mr Speaker, and it is probably criminally negligent. This government has failed to adequately resource biosecurity. It has failed the agricultural sector, it has failed the entire economy, and it will deliver us foot and mouth. They have failed completely, they are a disgrace, and they should resign. Thank you.
Speaker.
I call the honourable member